the Founders. This is a group of beings from what I call the 12th dimension. The 12th dimension is the immense sphere of creation, which exists far beyond what ordinary people are able to comprehend. To this channel the Founders are represented by giant bluish-white balls. Several balls gradually descend into the atmosphere of the Earth for the transmission of information and enlightenment of mankind. The biggest problem in providing information is the communication of their sphere with our sphere so that the information is exhaustive and useful for the evolution of mankind. In order for the Founders to communicate with us at all, they have to reduce part of their vibration from what is called the 12th density to the level of the 7th density, even before trying to upload information to my higher mind. Let me explain. To load an idea into the superconscious mind of a human being, the Founders take advantage of what is commonly called telepathic transmission. They say, in order to communicate in this way, they lower the vibration of the tiny part of themselves. Information flows into a higher mind, and then deciphers and translates into the languages of the Earth to be understood by the conscious minds of people. The Founders often remind that this is not an easy process. Presented ideas and concepts are difficult to explain using a limited vocabulary of the Earth's languages. However, most of the material can be absorbed at the energy level, even if it is difficult to understand by the mind. These messages, pay attention to the energy level of your body and notice what impressions you get from the information. It is not easy to represent logically consistent information transmitted by a mind developed far beyond human comprehension. Although it may seem that the messages below are a real-time dialogue between two or more entities, most of the information transmitted by the Founders was downloaded as a package into the channel's superconscious mind. Then it was translated into the conscious mind for distribution in the form of an understandable language. They chose me as one of the channels because I have the ability to mix science and spirituality, as well as the ability of verbal formulation and expression. Now many people speak of God creators through people. This is only one group and one channel. We encourage the search for additional material brought to Earth by other groups of God creators and other channels. In most cases, it will be very close to this information. Keep in mind, communication between people and the Founders. Energy. While you hear the words, you will be enveloped in a small part of their energy. Let part of the energy resonating with your soul come and help your awakening. So, beloved, we are deploying two processes before you. First, the process of evolution. This is a tiny spark of divinity that began as an inanimate object of first density, slowly developing through more and more complex levels of genetic configurations and eventually returns back to the level of divinity. At the same time there is a process of involution. Souls are separated from divinity as a being of the 12th density of light, gradually lower their vibrations to the 7th density, taking the form of luminous beings of light. It is then, through the process of incarnation and fragmentation, they separate even further, until they can explore all the levels of creation, from the grain of sand to the source from which they came. We will continue to explore how evolution and involution are intertwined, and how souls possessing free will acquire the ability to enter any level or dimension of creation and research this level or levels. Also, we will continue the history of your Earth, considering the civilizations that have emerged and disappeared from your world at different times. Then we will look at the various star races that have embodied and conquered your world and influence the life forms that are developing on Earth. We hope you will forgive our departure from the topic and return to the process of creation. We know that these ideas are contrary to most of what you were taught. That's why we move slowly and often come back. So, please, have patience. It is difficult for most Earth souls to comprehend this idea, because at the same time different energy flows operate. It is evolution, involution and immutability at very high levels. As we have already mentioned, time is flowing, not carved in stone, as your rational minds believe. Consequently, most of what we describe is subject to change. Although physical events have imprints in the Akashic Chronicles, and will continue to exist on one of your past timelines, as a species you have the ability to change timelines in order to better match your evolution. Some of the ideas presented will reflect what is represented in your mythological and religious teachings, others contradict the writings and teachings with which you are already familiar. We are not here to turn someone into your faith or to persuade you in anything. We ask that we remain open to our views on creation, realizing that we may have a wider perception than most of the entities that have visited your world. A more desirable way for extraterrestrials to explore the Earth is a process known as the incarnation coming through the human birth canal. Therefore, most aliens have come to your world in this way, through the process of incarnation. It's easier than using a natural form, depending on which group of aliens we're talking about. For example, at times you call ancient Egypt, you will see many complex natural, embodied forms and hybrids that existed on Earth at that time. The stories that clairvoyants and channels talk about in connection with aliens are often overly simplified to warm up the interest of the receiving information. And now let me summarize the above. The humanoid form that you know so well, with arms, legs, trunk, head and so on, was the result of genetic experiments and research conducted for a very long period of time. Almost 900 million of your Earth years. At that time, through the rearrangements of spirals and DNA structures, all kinds of exotic life forms were created. Most of the animal life that you are familiar with has appeared as a side effect of the study. When your scientists study the evolution of species, most of the mutations they discover involve experiments from both our own and other aliens. Returning to the land of Pan, we note that many experiments have gone very badly. Why and how did this happen? Problems associated with free will. In earthly terms, many years ago, the Creator decided not to impose any restrictions on what his inexperienced children could create. This decision is known as the law of free will. And this law has become the source of all the pain and suffering of your and countless other worlds. Each of you the Creator endowed with the ability to create a perfect template, not like the others. On the canvas of the fourth dimension, you could draw any desired picture, from love to the grotesque. These are bizarre forms. The Creator wanted to explore every potential idea and see how it manifests itself on the canvas of the imagination. That is why so many inexperienced life forms of the Creator experimented with their own DNA in such a way that they created formless, ugly and curved creations with corresponding curved mental processes. Many sparks of divinity souls daring to descend into these areas not indicated on the map were so hypnotized by their own creations that they forgot that they are the beings of the seventh density, born of light and the love of the Creator. More and more plunging into the creation of lower densities, they begin to identify themselves with the physics of these forms. It is the specific group of the seventh density Pleiadians who are responsible for these experiments. In many of your mythologies, one of the members of this group was called God Pan, a wizard Pan or an angel Pan. In the days of Pangaea, this particular creature, mostly of masculine nature, simply watched the spread of species in your world. The experiment included a number of aspects that went very badly. In the modern world, many scientists and engineers perform experiments that are out of control. In some cases, if the reactions cannot be controlled, you have to destroy the experimental setup. All of you have heard stories about inventors exploding with laboratories, due to the use of inappropriate combinations of chemicals in experiments. This is what happened to many souls who worked under the leadership of Pan in different laboratories of the Earth. Crossing people with aliens. In the days of Pangaea, your planet was inhabited by various creatures of the third and fourth density. Most forms spread, evolved on Earth as a combination of terrestrial and Pleiadian DNA, created by various combinations of DNA patterns. It's a pattern, shape, model. Thanks to the lush vegetative and mineral life of the first and second density, the Earth attracted great space attention. Many subgroups of humanity that originated in the star systems of Lyra Vega and the Pleiades have settled into the neighboring regions of your galaxy. They were the results of similar experiments conducted in other worlds by other souls. Formerly part of our program and under our leadership, we taught our students how to spread life on different planets. The human form, created by the 7th density Pleiadians, took root in more than 100 stellar systems in your galaxy. Therefore, once in different sectors, there were over 100 subspecies of people. Some of them are well known to your clairvoyants, psychics and metaphysicians. We will describe them in order of predominance in your today's world. Also, we will try to describe the chronological order in which these species developed, and give detailed information when they migrated to Earth. In addition to the primary distribution of species through evolution and mutation, there are two ways in which new species of humanoids can appear on Earth. The first way direct introduction into your world of aliens in a natural form. Expressed in other terms, the spacecraft flies into the atmosphere of the Earth, the invaders put the ship on the surface of the planet, exit it and walk among the life forms of the Earth. Aliens can have the ability to interbreed with people who exist on Earth and create hybrid life forms, a combination of their natural form and the already existing human form. This is not always easy and not always successful. Sometimes this leads to undesirable results. Sometimes the natural form of aliens is very difficult to exist on Earth because of heavy and dense gravitational and electromagnetic fields. Therefore, this is not always the easiest or preferred way of communicating aliens with people. Nevertheless, and now in different parts of the Earth such way of contact with aliens is carried out. Although the number of such contacts is small in comparison with the general population of the planet. The land of Pan. In the heyday, from 100 to 10 million years ago, a civilization appeared that was called the land of Pan or Pangaea. In the days of Pangaea, experiments were intensively carried out with DNA, and custodians were not built into the terrestrial laboratory. The latter means that different life forms could interbreed and create exotic mixtures and hybrids literally without restrictions. In addition to life forms that resemble a mixture of horses, people and fairies, other eccentric creations wandered in your world. All of them were the result of experiments with DNA and interspecific crossing. Two of them, Pegasus and Centaur. In the genetic codes of each species of Pangaea, a plan for the physical evolution of the infinite creator was built in. The inspiration of creation triggers the principle of synthropy, the opposite of entropy. This means that the natural aspiration of creation will be an increase in order, complication, reason and self-awareness. During inspiration, all life forms have a pattern of natural selection encoded in the creatures. As the life forms of Pan begin to grow in awareness, they develop different levels of intelligence. When the Pleiadians were incarnated in the developing life forms, a mutation occurred that allowed the organisms to make a sudden leap in awareness. They begin to realize that they are part of creation and are directly connected to the source. So the physical and spiritual evolution merged. As sparks of the primary energy of the source, the newly awakened souls felt a passionate desire to return to the source. They realized that the part of the source separated from the breath of love and light and passes through the external experience of the incarnation to these life forms, partly to a man and partly to a woman. They gave the realm of creation, in which they could learn to become gods by right. This level is known as the fourth dimension or sphere of mind, knowledge and imagination. In the pattern of each human life form, there is a desire to create as the creator. As in every child born by parents, the potentials, hopes and aspirations of parents are laid. It should be noted, in order to become a perfect carrier for incoming Pleiadian souls, hominids or otherwise erect primate mutated into a reasonable person. Unchanged hominids continued their spiral of evolution. All life forms have the essence of the soul, but the essence of the developing hominids is elementary compared to the incarnating Pleiadians and their form a reasonable person. Your anthropologists are bewildered by the sudden appearance of a reasonable man millions of years ago. Now we can clarify this position. Let's repeat what happened in Pangaea. The civilization was the result of experimenting with the DNA of the souls of the 7th density Pleiadians, who explored and spread life on Earth. Through the combination and recombination of DNA spirals, many different life forms were created. Some of them were of a very exotic nature, including centaurs, half human half horse, unicorns and other hybrid forms. At first everything looked like an experiment. See what happens if this spiral is connected to that, and so on. Some life forms arose as a result of crossing species, others were created in the laboratory. In this experiment, we were architects, spreading many kinds of life on your Earth. We learned a lot about life itself. In the period from 100 to 10 million years ago, most of the Earth was covered with tropical jungles. Evidence of this you can see by exploring geological formations, especially in the areas of deserts. For example, a barren desert, known as petrified forest in the northeastern part of Arizona, was once an impenetrable jungle. Many areas, including your favorite hot place Sedona, most of the time stayed underwater. Your world was 90% covered in water, with thickets in most places. Even the polar regions were full of life. On your planet, the humanoid form was known about 100 million years ago, just in the middle of the jungle period. These were small groups of humanoids living in relatively limited areas of your world. Humanoids were 7th density creatures, with wings and highly developed telepathic and psychic abilities. They lived in paradise. They were loving, friendly and communicated with exotic plant and animal life, which is abundant here. They extracted food directly from sunlight, and water was absorbed by pores. They did not need anything but each other. This is an approximate equivalent of what in your religious writings is called the Garden of Eden. At that time, life forms were diverse and there were a lot of them. About 60 million years ago, when the comet Arunutak made its cycle, and this is 10,500 years, and came to Earth too close, dinosaurs were killed. The resulting cold snap destroyed most of the plant and animal life, but Earth, possessing an amazing ability to self-repair, was able to recover and provided another fertile period. However, before this happened, only a few 100,000 humanoid forms survived on Earth, and most of them went underground. With the help of various Pleiadian groups, they created an underground world of great beauty and complexity. That's where the legends of the inner land originate. Many cities of the inner Earth exist in the etheric spheres. We will talk about it later. But you will ask about fossil remnants. Skeptics who doubt that humanity has such a long history point to the abundance of dinosaur bones and the relative absence of the remains of early humans. The answer lies in the way they die. As a result of the passage of the comet, due to the rapid drop in temperature, the skeletons of large creations almost immediately froze, and this allowed large parts of their structure to survive in time. In addition, many dinosaurs lived in areas where floods later retreated, exposing the land that had once been underwater. Most of the early human civilizations were in places that are still underwater. In the coming years, the remains of early people will be discovered. With internet and global communication systems, it will be almost impossible to hide this information. Since then, as a grand experiment began to unfold on your planet, there were 4 main and many small civilizations: Pangaea, Lemuria, Atlantis and modern civilization. In addition, in your solar system there were 2 main events that dramatically affected the history of your world: destruction of Maldek and the destruction of the surface of Mars. We greatly simplify history, because there were many other events: the Lucifer rebellion, which we attribute to the invasion of Orion, the introduction of reptilians from the alpha of the dragon, the reign of the Syrians in biblical and pre-biblical times, and the quiet invasion of the Zeta Cetigrae. You will notice that different extraterrestrial races strongly influence the root race of mankind almost at every step. Keep in mind that the listed races, these are just the main alien introductions. There were many others, including a visit from certain sectors of Andromeda, of different levels and dimensions of the Pleiadian groups, representatives of Venus, Arcturus, Antares, Polar, the Alpha Centauri, and other regions of your galaxy. Add to this the observation of your successes from the councils of Alcyon, the Great White Brotherhood, the Confederations of Light and their offshoots Ashtar, the Solar Cross, and so on. Many interplanetary worshippers: Melchizedek, Metatron, Enoch, and so on, and you'll get a pot of porridge on the space stove. About some of them are legends, including Pegasus and Centaur, not to be confused with the constellation of Alpha Centauri. Some creatures were a descending branch of dinosaurs and early reptilians. Dragons came in folklore from 2 sources: hybrids created during the Pangaea and the invasion of dragonaut humanoid reptiloid creatures from the star system Alpha Dragon. The early dragons were reptilian creatures developing along with dinosaurs. They genetically manipulated us and other groups of aliens. Later, dragons came to Earth in their reptiloid form and began to interbreed and create exotic forms of dragon. The fall of Pangaea was an example of a fall from favor. It all happened when the sons of God, the 7th density Pleiadians, were embodied in the humanoid forms developing on Earth and forgot about their divine connection. Scientists studying evolution consider the change introduced by the Pleiadians as an inexplicable mutation, which marks the difference between primates and humans. As stated before, the incarnated Pleiadians interbred with different beings already developing on Earth. So half horses of half people appeared and many others. The kingdom of fairies was one of the groups influenced by such a crossing. At that time, the fairies lived in the 4th density, and when they crossed with the 7th density Pleiadians, they dressed a humanoid form with wings. When they crossed with 4-legged creatures, one of the results was Pegasus, or a winged horse. When the humanoid Pleiadian souls lowered the vibration due to the hypnotic effect of lower densities, their wings atrophied, along with telepathic and other abilities. More and more they became like creatures developing on Earth, more animals by nature and less capable of expressing higher reasonable mental abilities. All this went on until about 10 million years ago, when the cosmic cycle ended, and electromagnetic polarities shifted. At that time, as a result of changes in electromagnetic frequencies, severe storms were raging on Earth. Flood washed away most of the creatures that live on Earth. In your religious writings this is called the Great Flood. At that time most of the Earth was covered with water, with small islets of land and life, preserved here and there. Noah's biblical story is a metaphorical and allegorical story related to the rescue operations undertaken by the Pleiadians to preserve many species that were threatened with extinction due to the flood.